Welcome back. Doug Pagitt Radio live from the Minnesota State Fair.
Yeah.
You can see the crowds have really swelled here.
We have a throng.
We have a throng, and they're not being conducted by the host. It's just their own desires to scream and yell and have some fun here at the fair. Now, people have just walked up and then saw there was nothing exciting actually going on and turned around and walked away. So you get both sides of this here on AM 950, broadcasting out of the Dome, which really is worth seeing in its own right. It's almost like the early episodes of Lost. There's just something really great going on here on the corner of Randall and Cooper. Make your way by, and if you can't make it by while Doug Pagitt Radio is broadcasting, there's broadcasts all day long, every day here on this radio station. So if you're new to the radio station through this radio program, listen to the other programming that goes on. And if you're new to the show based on the station, we're glad to have you listening aboard here. I have Russell Rathbun. Did you hear that? All of a sudden I went all English on you. Russell Rathbun sitting to my right. Russell is an author, like we mentioned. He's also he's a personal fashion consultant.
That's
true. You can
true.
spend some time with him if you'd like to. But he curates a website for people who put together sermons. Now, if you don't know how all this works, in some traditions, really in quite many traditions, when people have a religious service to put on a Sunday, there is a predetermined list of topics and Bible passages that they're supposed to read, and it's called the lectionary. And this lectionary is what, if you go to many Lutheran churches or Episcopal churches and some Catholic churches and a number of other kinds, they might be preaching from the lectionary, at least the lectionary of their own tribe. And for some of these folks, it gets kind of hard to know what to talk about on that. So Russell has put together a resource.
Did you just say Russell?
Called The Hardest Question. And The Hardest Question is a place where they try to raise some other ways to think about these liturgical texts.
Yeah, the hardestquestion.org is the blog, and what we try to do every week, there are many lectionary websites that try and explain what the scripture for that week.
Really? There's lots of these things?
There is.
Isn't one sort of enough? No, I guess not. Well,
yeah, I know you're really anti-lectionary.
Well, I'm not anti-lectionary. Yeah. I just think it's ridiculous and bad for Christianity. But I'm not really.
Well, can I just before I go in there? I got two things going. I want to talk to that.
I don't have the energy. To
my son Joe is hitting me on the shoulder. Did you want to say something, Joe? What is that?
Talk about Batman.
Okay, no, that's inappropriate. Oh yeah, he was just pointing out his favorite chapter in my book Midrash on the Juanitos.
Is about Batman?
About Batman, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now that changes everything. Why would you not lead with your description of the book Midrash on the Juanitos?
This is what Joe is trying to point out. Yeah.
There's a chapter on Batman.
Yeah, Batman, explicating the text. Yeah.
So like if Batman were to read his way through 3 John.
Yeah,
that kind of thing?
Yeah, Batman explaining the scriptures. That's a chapter.
Does he have a dark night of the soul?
Look at that. Yeah. See?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm here all week. Try the Prana Pub.
Yeah.
This is why there's a radio host and a sidekick.
Yeah,
yes.
it's good. No.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
All right.
No.
Tell us about this hardest question.
But let me go. Some lectionary sites, they try to, people write essays, they write a little thing, a meditation, what that scripture is about. In other words, they give you the answer.
They give you the answer. They say, here's a good way to talk about it.
Right, here's a good way to talk. This is what this is about. So at thehardestquestion.org, we try and ask the hardest question we can of the text. We read it, and, so many times you read a Bible verse and you go like, well, what the hell?
Yeah.
What is this about?
Yeah.
This doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, I really don't want that to be true.
No, I hate this.
Yeah. Yeah. So like
Yeah.
the example is the one this week, which I was fortunate enough to be a guest.
You were a guest contributor this week on
contributor, and the parable that was chosen by whomever put together the lectionary and all of their grand wisdom selected this one story out of the Gospel of Luke, I think it was, and it's where Jesus compares how a follower of his should be like someone who's going to build a tower or a general of an army who's going to go to war. Right. And he says, how those guys count the costs and plan and make arrangements? Yeah. That's what my followers should do. And I thought, I don't like the idea that Jesus compares being a follower of Jesus with a development company and a warmonger.
No, I love that.
I'm quite bothered by the fact that, building towers and killing people is what Jesus says. Yeah, those guys, that's what I want my people to be like.
I love that that's what you got out of that text, because that's what we like to do at The Hardest Question, just to look at that. Whoever stopped and thought, wait a minute, this is like a corporate developer.
A corporate developer.
And
it was like Halliburton.
Right.
That's what I'm getting at.
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, that's not what.
And Jesus says you should look at these guys.
Yeah.
They count the cost. They know what he's trying to talk about following him. So if you're a good corporate citizen, that's the kind of followers I want.
That's the kind of followers I want.
And-
So I try to raise. Well, how are we supposed to think about that? And is that what you typically do in the hardest question? You say to them, raise some questions for the people in your
Okay,
congregation.
let me
to
jump
think
in.
about?
Yeah.
So on the hardest question, you have someone who reads the lectionary
Yeah.
and then asks the hardest question.
Right.
And then you or someone else responds to that question and try to answer it.
We don't try to answer. We just try and we respond to it and say, yeah, I hear that. That is a good question. I hear it. But, well, what about this question? Or it makes me think about this question.
So-
it's sort of an ongoing dialogue, and it's sort of on the Midrashic tradition.
So Doug
rabbis-
had the question and you had the response, right?
I think, I'm going to have a response to Doug's question.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
that's
So-
right.
And if
And
people
then we
want-
have all kinds of contributors. People, post comments, and the dialogue continues. All people trying to get together and figure out what are they going to say about this text, and hopefully, people will move to preach sermons that contain more of this idea of questions than answers. Because who wants to go to? I mean, basically, people don't want to go to church anyway. I mean, let's be
Yeah,
honest.
right.
Nobody really wants to go to church.
Right.
And then you go to church and you hear the same thing over and over again. And answers, nobody really wants answers anyway. So if you go to church and you hear some really good questions, then at least you leave going like, huh. Instead of leaving going like, man,
Yeah.
Yeah, how come I don't think like
that's
those
an hour of
people
my
all do?
life I'm not going to get back. You know.
If
Much
only
like
an
this
hour.
radio program is what I
Right,
mean.
right,
For a lot of people, when they're
Yeah.
thinking like, oh, you got to be kidding me. How did I let that happen? So that's Russell Rathbun. He's doing some very interesting things over at his church that nobody wants to go to, called the House of Mercy
Yeah.
in St. Paul. And he's got a great
I mean,
little
it's
book.
not that bad.
He's got a great
but-
little book called Midrash on the
Yeah.
Juanitos.
Yep.
And it talks about Batman's reading of the Bible, which is an awesome idea.
Yes.
And the hardest question at thehardestquestion.org for those who are trying to put together sermons that are thinking more broadly than just providing answers to providing provocative questions.
That's
Love me
right.
some Rathbun.
Hey,
Oh,
if you want to
thanks so
win
much.
either of Russell's books and you want to win it in the drawing along with the Books on a Stick pack
Yeah.
at the Minnesota State Fair, a State Fair original and now a State Fair classic all in the same day.
Uh-huh.
Then you sign up over at the AM 950 booth right behind you if you're here at the fair, or the corner of Randall and Cooper. Get your name in the box over there, and you'll be put on the newsletter mailing list for AM 950, and you also have a chance to win one of these books. And if while you're over there, take a look at their fancy T-shirts. You know, the State Fair is about all kinds of product
That is
giveaway.
really nice.
And on the back of the shirt, leaning to the left, it says on the back of the shirt, if you can read this, you're leaning left. AM 950 Progressive
good.
Talk Radio. See, because your head would have to be turned left so you could read it.
Oh, yeah. It's
Justin, the guy in the booth behind me, came up with that himself, and now it's on a T-shirt for sale right over there in front. Hey, the geothermal booth is across the street from us, and Justin's the voice that you hear in these ads for geothermal. It all comes together here on AM 950.
Yes.
You know what else comes together on AM 950? John Musick and his own personal natural health coach, who's going to be with us here after the break.
Yes.
Natural health coach Shelley Pagitt, live and in person. Who
Yeah.
I'm sure will be saying to the rest of us, don't eat that while you're at the Minnesota State Fair. We'll hear from here after the break on AM 950, the voice of Minnesota. Doug Pagitt Radio.